What's up, investors? Welcome to another episode of the W.T.F report, bringing you the latest and greatest news that directly impact our financial markets and, more importantly, our portfolios. This week we had a very up and down week, and within that we had banks commit a bit of an oopsie. We had the electric vehicles have an interesting week as well, and along with that, Microsoft ended up acquiring a company, but it was not TikTok. So, without further ado, my name is Ayan with AQ Markets, and you're watching this week's W.T.F report. Overall market summary, it was pretty interesting. We started off really bad in the beginning of the week, and then around Wednesday after it turned around. So we ended up flat on the Dow Jones, just up around 0.2%. We had the S&P 500 up around 1%, and then the NASDAQ, surprisingly, was up 2.6% after having the previous 2 weeks of some pretty steep declines. So let's start off on Monday. On Monday, we had some pretty bad news coming from Europe stating that they might do a second lockdown, given that the COVID-19 cases are starting to kind of spike again and they're hitting levels that they were seeing back in April and May, which is not good. The markets reacted on that. The indices were down pretty harshly, and with that we saw the travel stocks plummet pretty harshly again because of the international travel having some more problems going ahead of them. But later on in the week we ended up rebounding just a little bit just to bring us up to the positive range. The airlines and the cruises had some positive sentiment going around their future outlooks about how there's going to be a lot of pent-up demand. And then along with that, we had Johnson & Johnson reveal that they're showing some very positive signs in the early testing of their COVID-19 vaccine. So that kind of propped up markets again coming into Friday. So let's start with banks. So typically, you're supposed to trust your bank. You're putting your money in there. You have some nice people at the counter talking to you, and you always have good customer service. But unfortunately, some of the higher ups within these big major banks, they do some stuff that's bad. And this kind of ruins the overall integrity of the market. People get a little bit unsure, and it overall just affects them. As you can see from the index, they're down 4% this week. And the reason coming is that there apparently has been some documents issued by the Treasury Department stating that there's been dirty money that's being passed around in these banks behind the scenes without anyone knowing. Dirty money is classified as money that has been used or tagged for illicit activities when it comes to either terrorism, drugs, or just straight up tax evasion, or many other corrupt things that happen in this world. So a lot of banks were actually tagged with this, and it showed that around $2 trillion has been moved around in the last 10 to 15 years, which is just not a good sign for the banking industry. Then we got hit with a double whammy when JP Morgan got fined $1 billion for spoofing orders. And what spoofing is when you essentially put in an order that you don't intend to execute, but you do it to increase volume or increase sentiment within a certain industry. They were doing this in the mining and mineral industry, which propped up a lot of these shares on a lot of these indexes, just because they were putting in these fake orders and then canceling them last minute, but capitalizing on that upward momentum, and then probably capitalizing on the downward momentum when they canceled it. So banks had a pretty rough week this week. Talking about our two favorite electric vehicle manufacturers, even though only one of them has a product, the other one still hasn't made anything, Nikola and Tesla. And no, I'm not talking about the famous scientist. Let's start off with Nikola. Nikola had an absolutely horrible week. As I mentioned in the prior WTF report, Hindenburg Research published a very negative research report calling them a complete fraud, saying they have nothing and the stock is essentially useless and worthless. Well, the founder stepped down as the executive chairman of the company, which kind of set another chain reaction of the stock being on a decline. As you can see, they did not do so hot this week. Now, for the other electric car manufacturer that actually has products, they ended up doing something called Battery Day, which is an unveiling of the future of the company, what new products are coming out with, what new technology they had. And you'd think this would be a good opportunity for Tesla to just kind of like rally their stock again with all this positive news, but it didn't really end up that way. So Elon Musk ended up saying that the company has substantially decreased the cost of producing these batteries, which means that they're going to be able to produce a Tesla car for around $25,000. That's cool. But however, the rest of the event, the analysts were saying that essentially there was just a lack of catalysts for a lot of positive growth within the company, and they're starting to realize that, hey, maybe the valuation that Tesla's at right now is probably going to stay stagnant for a few years or for at least an extended amount of time, considering they don't have much more tailwinds ahead of them. Along with that, this week we also had some very interesting news when it comes to video games. So let's start off with Microsoft. As you guys know, Microsoft was originally the leading candidate in buying TikTok. Good thing they didn't, because Oracle is still facing a lot of issues on trying to cement this deal and get it to go through the Justice Department and having China agree with it. So they ended up buying something totally different, which makes a lot more sense for them. they ended up buying ZeniMax Media, which is the parent company that has Bethesda Studios. Bethesda Studios is a video game publisher that has the rights and the content of some very, very heavy-hitting, big-name video game series, which means that Microsoft is going to have the sole ownership and the merchandise and the licensing and the game production for a lot of these big games. This is very important considering the next generation of consoles is going to be coming out. They actually just started doing pre-orders for the new Xbox, and now this is going to give them the opportunity to make a lot of these games exclusive to the Xbox, thus making the sales of their Xbox go up. But in the grand scheme of things, this will also be a great positive since a lot of these games have some very loyal followers and a very growing audience. So they're really taking a big shot at the video game world with this. Along with that, we also had a new competitor join the video game space, and that's right, Amazon. Amazon has entered every single industry in the last 10 to 15 years, so why not enter the video game space? It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, loyal fans, people will play for 30, 40 years, and it's just, why not, you know? So they've actually launched something called Amazon Luna, which is going to be a platform that's going to be cloud-based, where you pay actually a subscription, $5.99 a month is what it's going to be initially priced at, and you could play a bunch of games that are on the Amazon Luna service. This is going to be a very interesting step for them, as a subscription-based video game platform has not really been like common ground for a lot of video game players, because typically they buy video games, they have it, they play it on the console of their choice, and that's it, just one-time fees. So we're going to see how this evolves over time. This might actually be a very smart move, because a lot of video game creators might be able to push some of their own original games onto the Luna platform, which will give them notoriety and will also incentivize creators to maybe move towards and migrate towards this Amazon Luna platform. So we're going to see how that evolves over time. This concludes this week's WTF report. As always, if there's anything I missed or if there's anything you want to talk about, drop a comment below. And most important of all, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next video so you can stay informed about the markets. Thank you guys. I'll see you next week.